What happens when the roar of the crowd finally fades away? What remains of a person when the jerseys are hung up, the headlines change, and the bright lights of the stadium dim for the last time? We often think we know our heroes. We see them in moments of triumph, lifting trophies, scoring winning goals, standing on podiums. But the story we see is just one chapter in a much longer, more complicated book. Today, we're not just talking about a hockey player. We are delving into the life of a man whose journey began on the cold ice rinks of the dying Soviet Union, took him to the grandest stages of professional sports, and placed him in the heart of a public love story, before ending in a way that left everyone who knew his name asking the same heartbreaking question: why? This is the story of Konstantin Koltsov, a man known for his lightning speed on the ice, but whose inner world, with its own silent victories and invisible battles, remained a mystery to most. So, settle in as we trace the life of a Belarusian prodigy, a fierce competitor, and a man whose final chapter is a tragic reminder that we never truly know the battles people are fighting in silence. To understand Konstantin, you have to understand the world he was born into. Minsk, 1981. It was the capital of the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, a cornerstone of the vast, monolithic Soviet Union. Life was structured, predictable, and for many, defined by a sense of collective purpose. But beneath the surface, the foundations of this empire were beginning to crack. Change was in the air, even if no one could yet predict the storm that was coming. For a young boy like Konstantin, this world wasn't about geopolitics. It was about the biting cold of winter, the towering concrete apartment blocks, and the promise of escape that could be found in sports. In the Soviet system, sport wasn't just a hobby. It was a pathway. It was a state-sponsored machine designed to produce champions, symbols of national strength and pride. And no sport was more revered, more mythologized than ice hockey. The rink was a theater of speed, grace, and brutal ballet. For a child with natural talent, it was a place where you could become more than just another face in the crowd. It was a chance to be a hero. This was the environment that forged Konstantin Koltsov. From a very young age, he wasn't just playing a game. He was being molded by a culture that demanded discipline, sacrifice, and an almost fanatical dedication to excellence. His childhood wasn't just a childhood. It was an apprenticeship for glory. And on the ice, it quickly became clear that this young boy was special. Speed. That was the first thing everyone noticed. On a sheet of ice, Konstantin Koltsov moved differently. He didn't just skate, he flew. It was this electrifying pace that earned him a formidable reputation in the youth leagues of Belarus and Russia. His talent was so undeniable that scouts from across the Atlantic started to take notice. They saw in him a raw, explosive potential that couldn't be ignored. His style of play even earned him a daunting nickname, the Russian Rocket 2. It was a comparison to the legendary Pavel Bure, one of the fastest and most thrilling players the game had ever seen. Imagine the pressure of that nickname for a teenager. It was both a crown and a heavy burden, a testament to his incredible promise. That promise culminated in 1999. In the world of hockey, the NHL entry draft is a day of destiny, where teenage dreams are either realized or shattered. For Konstantin, it was the day his life changed forever. The Pittsburgh Penguins, a storied franchise in the National Hockey League, selected him in the first round. He was just 18 years old, a boy from Minsk, now the property of one of the biggest hockey leagues in the world. His journey to North America wasn't immediate, but when he finally arrived, he stepped into a locker room filled with living legends. He was now teammates with Mario Lemieux and would soon play alongside two prodigious young talents who would go on to define an era, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. This was the pinnacle. He had made it. Over 3 seasons with the Penguins, Koltsov played 144 games. He showed flashes of that incredible speed, moments of brilliance that reminded everyone why he was a first-round pick. He was a solid, dependable player for the mighty Penguins team. But the superstardom that his Russian Rocket 2 nickname had promised never fully materialized in the NHL. For many athletes, this could be seen as a failure, but for Konstantin, it was simply the next turn in his journey. The NHL wasn't his final destination. It was a chapter, an experience that would shape the player and the man he was destined to become back home. Sometimes, to find where you truly belong, you have to go home. In 2006, Koltsov left the NHL and returned to Russia, joining the team Salavat Ulayev Ufa in what would eventually become the Continental Hockey League, or the KHL. And it was here, back in a world he understood, that Konstantin Koltsov truly found his greatness. In the KHL, he wasn't just another player, he was a leader. His speed was still his greatest weapon, but now it was paired with the experience and wisdom gained from his years in North America. He became a cornerstone of his team, a respected veteran who led by example. The culmination of this chapter came in 2011. Koltsov and his teammates at Salavat Ulayev Ufa battled their way to the pinnacle of Russian hockey, winning the Gagarin Cup, the KHL's ultimate prize. This was his championship. This was his moment of validation. Lifting that trophy wasn't just a victory for his team, it was a personal triumph. He had proven that he was more than just an NHL prospect who didn't pan out. He was a champion, a leader, and one of the most respected players in the league. That leadership wasn't just about wearing a letter on his jersey. It was in the quiet moments, the nod to a young player after a tough shift, the ability to translate a coach's fury into practical advice, the grit to set the tempo in practice when everyone else was running on fumes. He became a bridge between two worlds of hockey, the hard-nosed professional discipline he'd learned in Pittsburgh, and the fluid creative style he'd grown up with. That unique blend of toughness and skill earned him a level of respect that statistics could never capture. The Gagarin Cup win wasn't a finish line either. It was the foundation upon which he built the final act of his playing career. For several more seasons, he was a constant presence, a player whose reputation preceded him. The explosive burst of his youth may have mellowed, but it was replaced by an uncanny hockey sense. He knew where the play was going before it developed, anticipating passes and frustrating opponents with his positioning alone. He was no longer just the fast guy. He was one of the smartest guys on the ice, a living blueprint for younger players on how to evolve and extend a career. And when the time finally came to hang up his skates, the transition felt completely natural. The man who had led on the ice was destined to lead from behind the bench. As a coach, he brought that same intensity and intelligence, that same understanding of what it takes to forge a winning team. The journey that had taken him from a promising kid in Belarus to the NHL and back to glory in Ufa had come full circle. He had found his ultimate purpose not just in playing the game, but in teaching it, ensuring that the lessons of his own winding path would shape the next generation. The nickname Russian Rocket 2 was a memory from another lifetime, replaced by a far more meaningful title, champion. He played for several more years, his love for the game never waning. And when his body could no longer keep up with the demands of playing, he did what all true lovers of the game do. He transitioned to coaching. He wanted to give back, to share the knowledge he had spent a lifetime acquiring. He worked as an assistant coach for several teams, including the Belarusian national team, always staying close to the ice that had been the one constant in his life. He was shaping a new generation, his story moving from on-ice heroics to off-ice mentorship. By all accounts, he was settling into a respected and fulfilling second act in his career, and it was during this time that a new, very public chapter of his life began, one that would bring him back into the international spotlight, not for his past on the ice, but for the person he loved. Love stories in the world of elite sports are often subject to intense public fascination. When two high-profile athletes find each other, their lives become a public narrative. For Konstantin Koltsov, this narrative began with Aryna Sabalenka, the fierce and charismatic Belarusian tennis superstar. She was one of the most powerful players in the world, a Grand Slam champion with a fiery on-court personality. He was the respected retired hockey player, 17 years her senior. Their connection was immediate and undeniable. To the outside world, they seemed like a perfect match. Their social media was filled with images of joy, laughing together, supporting each other, traveling the world. He was a constant presence in her player's box during tournaments, his calm demeanor a steady anchor in the high-pressure world of professional tennis. She, in turn, spoke of him with deep affection. In one post, she called him, "My dearest person, my best friend, and my strongest support. He was, in her words, the one who made her believe in herself. One little-known story that perfectly illustrates their bond took place during a difficult period in Sabalenka's career. She was struggling with her serve, a key part of her game, and her confidence was shattered. She publicly contemplated firing her entire coaching team. It was Koltsov who reportedly stepped in. Drawing on his own experiences with career slumps and the psychology of high-stakes sports, he encouraged her to trust her team and to work through the problem, not run from it. His steadying influence was credited as a crucial factor in her emotional recovery and subsequent return to form. This wasn't just a celebrity romance. It appeared to be a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and understanding of the unique pressures they both faced. For Konstantin, it was a beautiful new chapter, one filled with love, travel, and supporting the woman he adored. The world saw a man who had successfully transitioned from his own athletic career to a life of happiness and contentment. But we now know that what the world saw was not the complete picture. Beneath this surface of happiness, a tragedy was unfolding in silence. On March 18, 2024, Konstantin Koltsov, a former Belarusian hockey player and coach, died in a tragic incident that stunned the sports world. Initially, his former club, Salavat Ulayev, reported that the 42-year-old had passed away due to a detached blood clot, suggesting a sudden medical event. The hockey community began mourning, with tributes highlighting Koltsov's career with the Pittsburgh Penguins and his coaching tenure. However, within hours, the Miami-Dade Police Department released a statement that drastically altered the narrative. At 12:39 a.m., officers responded to a call at the St. Regis Ball Harbor Resort in Miami, where a man had fallen from a balcony. The individual was identified as Koltsov, and the police classified the death as an apparent suicide, stating no foul play was suspected. The revelation that Koltsov's death was likely a suicide sent shockwaves through those who knew him and followed his story. The initial report of a blood clot had painted a picture of an unavoidable medical tragedy, but the police statement introduced a far more complex and troubling reality. The St. Regis, a luxurious oceanfront hotel, became the somber setting for this devastating event. The term apparent suicide raised immediate questions about Koltsov's state of mind. Known as the supportive partner of tennis star Aryna Sabalenka, he had appeared outwardly stable, often seen at her matches and featured in her social media posts as a cheerful presence. The idea that he could have been battling such profound despair was difficult to reconcile. The police provided scant details beyond the initial statement. The investigation confirmed the fall from a balcony, but offered no insight into the circumstances leading up to it. The absence of foul play suggested the act was deliberate, yet no public information clarified what drove Koltsov to this point. The lack of an autopsy report or additional official statements left the public grappling with unanswered questions. Social media platforms, including X, became a space for grief and confusion, with fans and colleagues expressing disbelief. Posts recalled Koltsov's contributions to hockey and his seemingly grounded life, making the suicide narrative feel even more jarring. For those close to Koltsov, particularly Sabalenka, the loss was deeply personal. The Miami Open, where she was a top seed, continued in the backdrop of this tragedy, amplifying the public's shock. The sports world paused to reflect on the hidden struggles that can afflict even those who seem successful. Koltsov's death underscored the unpredictability of mental health challenges, prompting calls for greater awareness. The stark contrast between his public persona and the reality of his final moments left a lasting impact, with the tragedy serving as a sobering reminder that despair can remain concealed until it's too late. But just as this shocking explanation began to take hold, a powerful voice of doubt emerged from thousands of miles away in Minsk. It was Yulia Mikhailova, Koltsov's ex-wife and the mother of his 3 sons. In an emotional interview with a Belarusian news outlet, she forcefully rejected the suicide narrative. She did not portray a man at the end of his rope. Instead, she painted a picture of a man who had plans, a man who, in her opinion, made a fatal miscalculation. She wasn't just speculating. She provided concrete details that created a compelling counter-narrative. She revealed that Koltsov had rented a car and had booked an apartment in a different location where he intended to stay. His bags, she said, contained his belongings, not packed as if he were leaving, but ready for a continued stay. Most likely he was very drunk, she stated. Unfortunately, hockey players are sometimes guilty of this. Her theory was that this was a tragic, alcohol-fueled accident, not a deliberate act of self-destruction. She insisted he had no reason to take his life. He was loved, he had his children, and he had his career. Her words introduced a profound element of doubt. Was the official narrative too simple? Had authorities rushed to a conclusion? Suddenly, the public was left with two irreconcilable stories: the official police finding of a suicide and a grieving family's insistence that it was a terrible, tragic mistake. Caught in the epicenter of this personal and public earthquake was Irina Sabalenka. She was now facing an impossible situation, mourning the death of a man she loved deeply, while simultaneously preparing to compete on one of the biggest stages in her sport, all under the intense glare of the world's media. The pressure was unimaginable. In an act of incredible fortitude, she chose to play. But before her first match, she released her own heartbreaking statement, clarifying one painful detail. "Konstantin's death is an unthinkable tragedy," she wrote, "and while we were no longer together, my heart is broken." This revelation, that they had recently separated, added yet another layer of complexity and sorrow. When she finally walked onto the court for her first match, she did so dressed entirely in black. It was a silent, powerful tribute, a public expression of her private mourning. She played with a quiet, steely resolve, winning her match in a performance that was both subdued and incredibly resilient. It was a testament to her strength, but the sadness was visible to all. The world was watching a young woman navigate the depths of grief in the most public way imaginable. What is the meaning we can draw from a life lived so intensely, yet cut so tragically short? His significance, first and foremost, is etched onto the ice. In Belarus and Russia, he will be remembered as a champion, a homegrown talent who reached the NHL and returned to become a star. He was a part of the 2011 Gagarin Cup winning team, a moment of glory that will forever be a part of KHL history. He represented his country on the international stage, including at 2 Olympic Games. Tributes from former teams and teammates spoke of his infectious smile, his leadership, and that unforgettable game-breaking speed. His on-ice achievements are undeniable, but his story's lasting impact, now forever intertwined with its tragic ending, goes far beyond goals and assists. His death forces us to have a painful but necessary conversation about the invisible pressures that can crush even the most elite athletes. We see the glory, but we rarely see the struggle. We don't see the anxiety before a big game, the loneliness of life on the road, or the daunting existential question that haunts every athlete: who am I when the game is over? The transition out of professional sports is a notoriously difficult period, a time when many athletes struggle with a loss of identity and purpose. While we don't know what was in Konstantin's mind, his story forces us to acknowledge these universal challenges. Furthermore, the unresolved nature of his death is a stark reflection of our modern age. We are flooded with information, official reports, family interviews, social media posts, yet a clear, definitive truth remains just out of reach. We are left in a state of uncomfortable ambiguity, a reminder that we can never truly know the full story of another person's inner life. The tragedy lies not just in his death, but in the painful, unanswered questions that will forever linger for his family, his loved ones, and his 3 sons. In the end, the life of Konstantin Koltsov was a story of contrasts. The boy from the rigid Soviet system who chased his dream in the dazzling world of Western capitalism. The player known for his explosive speed on the ice, who appeared as a calm, steadying presence off it. The man who lived a public love story, yet whose final hours are shrouded in private tragedy and conflicting narratives. We may never have all the answers. The debate between a deliberate act and a tragic accident may never be settled. But what we can do is remember the full arc of his journey. We can remember the thrilling young player who wore the nickname the Russian Rocket 2. We can remember the veteran leader who lifted the Gagarin Cup. And we can remember the man who was loved, who had children, and whose life, like any life, was a tapestry of brilliant triumphs and profound hidden struggles. His story is a powerful, if painful, reminder that behind every public figure is a human heart, with its own silent victories and invisible battles. We remember Konstantin Koltsov for his thrilling speed on the ice, but his story leaves us with something else, a heartbreaking and eternal silence.